In this video, let's look at how to do branching in AWS Lex version 2. Before that, we'll do a summary of the common terms that are used in the AWS Lex. So we have the intent, which represents an action that the user wants to perform. Slots in additional information prompt in between the intent. Lambda function is a set of programs or a script that will be processed during the runtime. Fulfillment is the completion of the intent of the action. Elicit means to bring forth, so like elicit slots means to bring out a slot. Elicit intents to bring out an intent. So once you are familiar with the terms, then it's much easier to understand how the whole flow is about. We are going to do an example, and the example will do a reservation of library resources. We have only two resources. One is to reserve the room, the other one is to reserve the book. So we only have two intents, but we need another intent for the welcome message, because the Lex itself is a static server, so it needs a trigger for it to start to have to invoke a welcome message. If not, it will be a blank chatbot. So so the trigger will be just the word hi, and then we'll prompt the user to enter the name. After that, we'll just say hi and how can I help you. So it will direct the user to key in the next intent, okay, either to reserve a room or to reserve a book. Okay, so let's do this portion first. Okay, I'm going to open my web browser and I'm going to log into the AWS. Okay, after I log into the AWS, I'll key in Lex and select Amazon Lex. And I will using the version 2 console. Okay, let's create a new bot. Create a blank bot. Let's call this library. Let's call this library 1. I'm going to create with basic Amazon Lex permission. Select no for the Children Online Privacy Protection Act, and the rest will remain as default. Okay, because I already have a bot that is called the library 1, so I'm going to change the name to create the bot and change it to library 2. So the language remains the same. The voice I will choose none. This is just a text-based application, and click on done. Now we're going to create a new intent. Let's call this welcome. Scroll down and we're going to add in some utterances. So let's enter maybe hi. Hi there. Hello. Just to give a few examples. We are going to need a slot to prompt the user to enter the name. So let's call this username. Slot type, we're going to use the inbuilt Amazon alphanumeric. Please enter your name. Okay. Okay, the rest we'll leave it as default. And we're going to save the intent. We build and test. Once the build is done, we'll test it. So if I type hello, you'll prompt me for the name. Let's call myself John. And the fulfillment message will be intent welcome as fulfilled. Okay, it's done. So now we go back to the flowchart. So instead of just fulfill, we're going to use the Lambda function so that you will go back to the intent again instead of ending the flow. So fulfillment basically to close the flow and go back to the original intent. We're going to use the ADC intent using Lambda function, so that after the user key in the name and we will prompt for how can I help you, and then the user enter say I want to reserve a room, and using Lambda it will select which room. Using Lambda it will select the correct intent, either reserve room or to reserve a book. So back to the AWS. Now we're going to open another window, another tab. So we're going to search for Lambda. We're going to create a new Lambda. So create function. Let's call this library to Lambda or Lambda library 2. Okay, the rest will be default. Let me expand the view so that it's easy for us to change the code. Okay, so we have the event here. The event is basically the input from other services. So for our cases will be from the Lex, and the Lex will input to here. There's a format that we have to follow, and from that we will extract the data from the event. Okay, so we basically we can delete all the default lines here. So since we are going to use the Lambda to handle the welcome message, first we need to ensure that it's coming from the welcome intent. One Lex or one chatbot, we have only one Lambda function. So in our Lambda function we have to handle different intent. So we're going to first to find out whether the event is coming from which intent. So we have the intent name equals to event dot. So we're going to find out the format that is used between the Lex version 2 and the Lambda. Okay, so in a new tab we're going to find Lex version 2 to Lambda format. Click on the AWS documentation. So we have two types. One is the input event format and the other one is the response format. We look at the input event format. We have to follow strictly the format over here. So we are going to extract the intent name, and we'll see that we have a few items here that we can extract from. So we can get it from the session state, and then the intent, and then the name, and then the name can be extracted from the string here. So over here we'll type in event dot session state dot intent dot name. Okay, then we'll check whether the intent name is from the welcome intent. If intent name equals to welcome, then we do something. So for our case, we will get the slot a username, so that we know that so that we know the name of the user. So we can have another variable called user name equals to event dot session state dot intent dot slot dot. Okay, the slot name we have to follow exactly what we have created. So in the welcome intent, the slot that we use is called username. So this will be user underscore name dot. Okay, look at the format here. Under the intent, we have the slots, then we have the value. Okay, slots name, value, and we will take the original value. That's what the user actually enters. Value dot original value. Once we have the name of the user, then we'll return the message. When we return, we have to follow the format strictly in this documentation, response format. Okay, and if you look through all this format, some of the elements are compulsory and some are not. So we look at this response view. We need the session state is required. Okay, so we need a dialog action, and the intent is needed, and the intent may not be needed if the dialog action type is delegate or illicit intent, and the message is required if the dialog action is illicit intent. Otherwise, I don't think it's necessary. Okay, so since, if you remember just now from the flowchart over here, we're going to use illicit intent, so that at the over here after the prompt, we'll get the user to enter the questions that will lead to the correct intent. So it will be illicit intent. We'll bring forth the next intent rather than to close. So we're going to use illicit intent. So return session state okay, bracket over here, there will be a dialog action, and followed by the type, which we are going to use is illicit intent. So if you're going to use illicit intent, then we will need the messages. We have to follow strictly the format. So basically what we can do, we can copy down for the messengers of how the message should be. Okay, let me do some alignment here.
Okay.
The content type will be using just a plain plain text return. And with a content which is a string, the string will be, okay, we do not need to use the image response card for now, so the whole thing can be deleted away. Okay, save it and we'll deploy. Okay, so let's go back to the Lex, and we have to refresh. We do not need to build again because we have not changed any intents message here. We only changed the Lambda, and then we have to deploy it, so we do not need to build again. So let's try hello, enter your name. Let's call myself John. Welcome, it's fulfilled. That's because in my fulfillment, I have to select use Lambda function, not this one. We have to select under the advanced option and use Lambda function for the fulfillment, and update the option, save the intent, and we got to build again. Let's try it again. Hi, hello. Okay, it doesn't work because we haven't selected the Lambda. So we click on this icon, and the Lambda function, we have to choose our Lambda is Lambda library 2, and the version we choose the latest, and save. Let's try again. Okay, I think we need to build again. Okay, let's try. Hi. Let's call myself John again. Invalid Lambda response. Okay, we have a spelling mistake here, so it should be G. Dialog action. This intent, make sure there's no mistake. Gotta save and deploy. We got to be set. Okay, go back to the Lambda. Okay, if you happen to have some errors, what we can do is we go to pointer and view logs in the CloudWatch. We look for the latest, and we scroll down for any error messages. Okay, so there's some error appear here. Cannot read property username of undefined. So the username does not appear in the Lex. So let's find out why. The mistake is over here, forget the slots. Save and deploy. Let's try it again. Hello, John. Okay, so now it's working. How can I help you? I would like to reserve a room. Okay, the intent is fulfilled. That's because I have not created the intent for reserve a room. So for this path, the intent will call the reserve room, and will prompt for enter the room number, and then will fulfill the room, fulfill the intent by returning a room number has been reserved. So for this, we do not need to use any lambda, but just a normal Lex entry. Now we're back in Lex. We're going to create another intent. Let's call this reserve room. In the utterances, we are going to say I would like to reserve a room, or just room reservation, or reserve room, or maybe just a room. After that, we would prompt for the user to enter the room number. So we call this slot name room number. Slot type, we'll be using the inbuilt slot type number. Please enter the room number that you would like to reserve, and we add. Save the intent, and we need a fulfillment message, so we can say your room followed by room number has been reserved. So in case of failure, something went wrong. Something went wrong. We save the intent. Before we build, let's go back to the welcome intent and make some changes to the message. So under the it's in the lambda, so we go back to the lambda and change this to hi, and then we have the space followed by the name and then the comma and how can I help you. Deploy and go back to the Lex and we build and test again. Okay, now we're going to test again. Hello, my name is John. I would like to reserve a room. Please enter the room number that you would like to reserve. Let's say 32. Okay, your room 32 has been reserved. Okay, and then we'll back to the beginning again. So let's say hello. Now my name is Mary, and I would like to reserve a book. Okay, because we have not created the intent for reserving a book. Okay, now we'll go back to the flowchart again. We have completed the intent for the welcome message and also the intent for room reservation. So now we're going to do the intent to reserve the book. Over here, once the user choose to reserve the book, he'll be prompted to enter the category either fiction or non-fiction. If the user enter for fiction, he'll be prompted local or international. If the person choose non-fiction, then he'll be prompted to enter the country of origin. So you can see that the slot will be separated and there's a branching. After the prompt, they'll be asked the same question. to enter the name of the book and then fulfill the reservation. So let's go back to the intent list and create a new intent. Let's call this reserve book. Okay, I have some utterance. I would like to reserve a book. Maybe book reservation. Or just a book. Okay, I'll make the window smaller so that you can see the flowchart together. Over here we have the first slot for the user to select either fiction or non-fiction. Then we have two more slots for if the user select fiction or if the user select non-fiction. And lastly, we have a slot for the user to enter the name. So total we have 4 slots. Before we okay, for these slots that will prompt the user to select the category, we restrict the user to only fiction or non-fiction. So we have to create our own slot type. Okay, so we'll create a new slot type. Okay, click on add slot type, and let's call this slot type category. Over here we have to restrict the slot value. First is fiction, and then we have a non-fiction. This is something like the utterance for the fiction. So the user might enter fairy tale, press a tab button, or they might enter fake story, just a story, not real, fiction, and any others. Okay, so for non-fiction, the user might enter non-fiction, documentary, real story, and and others that you can think of. Save slot type. Now we go back to the intent. So for the first slot, we'll have the prompt the user to enter either fiction or non-fiction. So let's call this a slot book category. Slot type, we have to choose what you have just created, slot type category. In the prompt, choose category. Okay, next we'll have a slot for if the user choose fiction. Let's call this slot book fiction. Slot type would be alphanumeric and prompt local or international. For this type of slots, because for the book fiction and the non-book fiction, these two slots are options, so therefore we have to uncheck for required for this intent. Now we add another one slot for book non-fiction. Again, we choose the alphanumeric and the prompt with country of origin. And we have to uncheck for required for this intent as well. And lastly, we need a slot for the book name. Again, alphanumeric. This is required for this intent. Now for this branching in the slot, we have to check for every slot. So for this case, we will not do the lambda at the fulfillment, but the lambda for every slot that it go into. So we have to check for use a lambda function for initialization and validation. Let's put a message for the fulfillment. In case of failure, something went wrong. Okay, now we have to go to the lambda. First, we have to check whether it's in the intent. So we check if intent name this would be make sure the name is correct. So we double check it's a reserved book. And next we'll check event.session state intent slots this is slots book category. Okay, why do we need to check whether is it a null? Look at its first intent slot book category. So since it's at the top here, when the user enter I would like to reserve a book, when it enters here, straight away we'll prompt the user to select the category. Okay, so at this point the slot for the category would be a null. because the user has not entered anything yet. Okay, so if it is now, then we'll go to the slots for this one. Go to the book, go to the slot category. Okay, so we have to follow the format strictly. It's a response, so we have to look at the response format, and we are going to follow what is needed and what is not needed. So definitely we need the session state and then the dialog action. In the dialog action, since we are going to use because over here we have to select the slot, so we're going to select the type, which is illicit slots. So if we have an illicit slot, then we will need the field for the slot to illicit. That means which slot for the next step. Okay, so we follow the format, which is here. We have the session state followed by dialog action, and then we have to fill in the type, which is illicit slots. So if we select the illicit slot, then we have to ensure that the slot to illicit, what is the slot name. After that, we have to include the intent as well. Do we need to include the intent? Intent is not required when the illicit intent or delegate, but since we are using the illicit slot, so we need to include the intent and also the state as well. Message is optional, but now we are going to so we are not going to include the message over here now. So we're going to return session state, dialog action, the type is illicit slots, and which slots to go to will be slot book category CAT, and we have to include the intent. The name of the intent is reserve book, and the state is in progress because it's not finished yet. Okay, save, and then we'll deploy. So now we are going to test it. Okay, so now the build is finished. We're going to test. I would like to reserve a book. So now the Lambda works. When I go into the intent, it will be prompt to choose fiction or non-fiction. This is what this statement is doing. So to continue, if the user select or enter fiction, he'll be prompt to your prompt local or international. That means the following, if the person choose fiction, you will go to this book fiction slot. So now the slot book category is not now anymore. So we will have a else if we have to choose dot value dot interpreted value So if it is interpreted as the fiction, and we are going to return something. So error here. Expected token. So what I'm going to return, we're going to return that we're going to use the elicit slot, and the slot to elicit is slot book fiction. And again, all the messages are actually inside the Lex. Save, and so if let's say the user enter for the non-fiction, so we can copy and paste the whole thing. So this would be non-fiction, and this should be book non-fiction, and deploy. I would like to reserve a book. So let's say I choose fiction. I'll be prompt local or international, so the next stage is not done yet. Okay, so let's choose non-fiction now. So let's say it's non-fiction. I'll be prompt different questions. Country of origin. So the branching works over here. So now the last slot will be prompt for the book name. Okay, for the slots for the book name, we can put somewhere here. After it's determined that it is for the reserved book intent. Okay, we can have if this is event dot session state dot intent dot slots dot slot dot book dot slot book fiction is not equals to none, which means that the user has entered values into the slot book fiction, or this would be slot book non-fiction. So if that's the case, then we'll return similarly for the next slot. So it's not book fiction, but book name. Okay, deploy and test. Okay, it's not working, so let's find out why is it not working. Okay, let's book. Okay, this should be before. Okay. Let's try again. Yeah, so it will prompt for the next slot. Okay, finally we'll be doing the fulfillment. After I enter the name of the book, then you will prompt your book has been reserved. So we have the last if statement. The last if statement is to check whether the slot for the book name has been fulfilled. Okay, when the slots for the slot book name is not equal to null, so the dialog action will be to close. Close is to fulfill the intent, and we have to include the intent, and the state will be fulfilled. Let's try it. Hello. The name will be, let's say, John. Book reservation. Fiction. International. The book of title, let's say, is Harry Potter. Okay, let's find out what's going wrong here. Okay, it's the name, the spelling of the name is not correct. Okay, let's try again. Okay, so now it works. So let's try for all the features, all the branches. So hello, enter your name. Let's call myself Mary. Hi Mary, how can I help you? I would like to reserve a room. Okay, enter the room number, let's say 23. Your room 23 has been reserved. Okay, I put hello again, and please enter your name. My name is John, and how can I help you? I would like to reserve a book. Which category? Let's say it's non-fiction. I will say not real. Local, international. So it means it's a fiction book. So let's say it's an international book. Let's enter the title of the book. Let's call it Zen. Your book Zen has been reserved. Okay, you notice that over here for the choosing the category, although the user can enter not real, real, any kind of utterance, we can also insert buttons so that the user can click and the interpreted value would be only one type. Okay, so how do we do that? We go back to the Lambda again. So this will be under the category slot, which is over here. So we can input or return a message. Okay, the message will be here. So for the message, we have to follow the format closely. So we look under the response format and add messengers. So we can copy down the whole message until here. The content type would be, button will be under the image response card. Content we are not be going to using the string. We are going to using the image response card. We need a title, but we do not need a subtitle. We are not going to put the picture here, so we're going to only have the buttons. So under the string, we can ask the user to choose a category. So we should have two buttons. Let me rearrange. So the first button would be fiction, and the values would be fiction as well. The text over here refers to the text on the button, and the values refers to the slot type value. So this would be non-fiction. The slot type value will be non-fiction. We have to ensure the name will be exactly the same. So let's go back to the slot type again. So the value that we have is non-fiction. So it's a cap F, and it's correct. Oh, okay, you don't need this. Okay, and then we'll deploy. Go back to the intent again. And we'll test it. Reserve a book. Oh, okay, let's look at what's the error here. There's a space. Shouldn't have a space. So there you have a button selection. So if I click on the fiction, it prompts local or international. So I choose local, and the book of the title is let's call it Zen. And now you have done. Okay, thank you for watching.